We've latched all the way across, and now it's time for our regular bind off. The same way you did under the arms, push those needles forward. This time I'm working from the right side so I can move a little more quickly. You've already learned this skill. We finish our last couple of stitches. I've hung this up here to help me support it. Get that out of the way, snip the yarn, leave about a 12-inch length because you want to use this for sewing up under the arm if there is an underarm. And you may either pull this yarn through this loop, or I generally prefer to pull it just through like this because it eliminates bulk in the edge. Now your ribbing is done. Yours will be longer than mine, and it's time to take off the weighted hem and the waste yarn. To remove the weighted hem, if you've used elastic thread, you're going to need scissors. You're going to have to snip every 5th or 6th row along there. But if you've used pull cord, you merely have to remove the clips. And sometimes you have to loosen these end couple of stitches. In this case, you don't have to. See that there's not a whole lot of pressure on that. Okay. You do that at either end. Grasp it firmly, pull it straight out, and the weighted hem falls away from your knitting. When you take your knitting off the frame, get rid of all the clips and roll it in this direction. Give it a good, healthy yank. Your stitches are not in the shape they're going to be in. Eventually, you need to let them rest, and that helps to set the stitches. They should rest at least 48 hours, for example, on a gauge swatch before you measure it. Now we have this waste yarn, and it was knitted from the bottom up, and that makes it a little trickier to rip, but I'm going to show you. You start with this end. If you tug at the end of every row, you'll open up a loop in the row below. I'm going to rip these across. Okay, I have 12 rows here. As soon as I get to this end, I'm making a ball at the same time. I lift, and see that nice big loop that I've opened? Come on, all knitters know how to squirrel through the various loops and holes. So you pass it through that and wind it back. See how this last row is, second to the last row. Just sort of pulls out this way. This is for those of us from the waste not, want not school of waste yarn. Once you get to this point, just kind of tug and get it out of the way. It'll pull through your stitches a different way. There we go. When in doubt, if it's in the way, cut it. A little bit of waste yarn we're allowed to waste. There it is. I think I just hooked that in. And there you have it. A cute little sweater back for a dwarf. Here's your little rib. Yours should be 10 rows long. Give that a yank. Come up to the side of the body. There's our underarm bind off. Here on this side, see that line of decreases? That is the not reverse transfer. That's the non-cheap Nordic ski wear version, as opposed to this side, where the stitches that are decreased lie in that direction perfectly. Okay, then we came up, did a couple of increases, and we have these wonderful, look at these diagonals, if you can see them. Hand knitters especially will be thrilled. And it is clear that we are not going to have time today to make a front to match this sweater. So what we are going to do is join these two shoulders together and make a cape or a hat or a sampler just of your knitting, but we want to put one more skill in, and that's knitting these shoulder seams together. You start by inserting a green card behind the needles, and the needles can be anywhere. And this time you're going to rehang the stitches. Notice that the right side of the fabric is facing me. I usually hang the back of the sweater first. You would never do this, of course, hang it back to a back. Notice how those loops stand up there just perfectly, and remember we were supposed to have 12 stitches in those shoulder seams. So I'm going to rehang those. All the way across. Then I'm going to push them behind the latches. Right side is facing me. This is the part where I always mess up. Let's see if I have 4, 5, and 4. All right, does anybody around here add? Is that 12? I'll find out if they have a drop stitch. Nope, there they are. They're all there. This extra, don't let that extra loop bother you. That's the end. Okay, take the front of your sweater, or this is not the front of the sweater, but it would be. This is where we had dropped our stitch, remember? And fold it over with the wrong side facing you. You want to knit right sides together. Again, fold that waist yarn over in those little loops. In this case, we're going to rehang our dropped stitch. Well, I'll get rid of that in a minute. Rehang these 12 loops. At this point, you might want to hang a claw weight on your knitting, maybe on the back or the front. When you're knitting a real sweater, you don't have to use a claw weight. There's enough weight in the body of the sweater to hold those stitches down, but this is a pretty lightweight little piece of knitting. Now, in some ways it's lightweight, but in other ways it's just fine. Okay, get rid of that pin that I so carefully twisted on there. And again, remove the waist yarn. This removes bulk. This time it rips easily. Okay, and stitch. Now notice, these are behind the latch, these are in front of the latch, and I'm using my hand for weight. Remove the green card, push the needles that you don't need out of working position, and magically stick the green card between the front rail and the butts of the needles. Pull those first stitches behind the back, and there you have it. You have pulled that seam together. There's nothing left to do but to bind it off, which we will do with a larger key plate. We're going to knit one more row to bind it off. In this case, we should have a size 3 key plate. Okay, here it is. And my carriage is on the wrong side. Remember those strings you left hanging? You find the string. This time you have to thread this yarn up through the fabric guide and through the eye of the carriage. I grab on to my knitting with some weight, knit one last row, and again, you're at the point where you're going to bind off the skill that you did before. So I would like you to complete that entire sequence. Bind off your ribbing, remove the weighted hem and waist yarn, then knit those two shoulders together, and you can go ahead and bind off, starting from right to left, and then joining. And here we have it, that beautiful little diagonal seam. This will look a little better when it's shrunk up. Hand knitters will especially appreciate this. And of course the shape is, well, a little like a cape. Very small head and neck. We won't bind that off. And you can use it for whatever you want, even a curly little dust rag. Thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoyed today's class as much as me. And if you can't make it out to my little island in my little school, please consider coming again to a video seminar. Your first bond sweater is already in production, in which we do all new skills and you build a sweater from beginning to end using good sense and
new techniques like the breaks all the rules can't possibly work but it does cast on that I invented. Again, the lazy knitter is added. Also color on the bond that's based on that sampler that you saw and a few other surprises. If you have any inquiries whatsoever to my school, please send a self-addressed stamped envelope to me. We're a one-person operation, and if I get an envelope with your name and address, I might get it to you this year. Thanks again. Until I see you, or until you see me, happy knitting.